Hello, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we are going to start Unit 16, Welfare State. And our topic is Justification of the Welfare State. The emergence of the case for the welfare state began with the argument that instead of public welfare being the cause of dependence, loss of autonomy, and capacity for individual responsibility for action, and the market as the source of independence and freedom. The opposite is the case. The advocates of welfare state argued that the individual has no control over his destiny in the context of impersonal market forces. The market system is unpredictable for some groups. That is, if people cannot be held responsible for their plight, the foundation for welfare had to be quite different from those associated with classical liberalism. Historically, a major factor in the development of the welfare state was the growing mass unemployment during the interwar period in the Western world, and the assumption that only the government could alleviate it. It was acceptance of the theory that distribution was not simple the distribution of income, but redistribution of resources according to ethical criteria such as need, desert, and so on, and even equally for its own sake. Social welfare was associated with social justice. For example, in Britain, the Privilege Report in 1942 identified five major categories of suffering: want, disease, ignorance, squalor, and illness. This established the foundation of the welfare state. Taken with the Keynesian microeconomic policies, the idea of welfare had become completely associated with a social philosophy designed not to replace the market but to correct it. The birth of the modern theory of welfare depended on the reinterpretation of certain key political concepts, notably liberty, equality, and justice. Their net effect was to transform the nature of society from a conception of loosely associated individuals into a more intimate form of community. It was argued that if people could be held together by social bonds that transcended contractual relationship, then they could make claims on each other as citizens of a common enterprise, which could exceed their contribution as measured in more calculative economic terms. State welfare was regarded not as an act of charity, but a form of entitlement. Simultaneously, the idea of welfare also developed outside the economic sphere. It concentrated on the need itself, regardless of its cause of a particular consequence that may flow from attempts to relieve it. If to this is added the demand for minimum income and redistribution in the name of social justice, we get the ideal of a citizenship. This is not defined by civil and political liberties alone, but also include claims to economic resources, not as market determined rewards for work, but as a consequence of the memberships of the community. In spite of the fact that the idea of the welfare state became a consensus view in the post war period, there was no argument within liberalism about the theoretical justification for the welfare state. Different scholars gave different justifications for the welfare state, such as to correct the ill effects of free trade capitalism, to enhance the liberty of the individual, to bring about an equalitarian society, to establish justice, which of course included social justice, to implement the citizenship rights, etc. Apart from these, there were also moral and altruistic justification. Let us have a brief look at some of them in our next section. The first one is state and the market. In the literature on social welfare, a dichotomy between the state and the market is shown. The main criticism against free trade capitalism was that it leads to monopoly capitalism and an economy dominated by the power of trust, combines cartels, multinationals, and transnational corporations. This in turn gives rise to a variety of social, economic, and political contradictions in society. In the absence of any positive interference by the state in the political economy, the exploitation of the working class by an aristocracy of monopoly capitalism without caring for any social responsibility, unemployment on a large scale, inhuman working conditions in factories, competitive low wages, long working hours, poverty, illiteracy, and poor health are bound to result. Also, trade capitalist economy is the enemy of socio-economic equality, as was pointed out by Green and Tavener. By denying redistribution of national wealth through the state, the market fosters inequality and injustice. It was argued that the old mechanism of market, because they were powered by self-interest, cannot be sensitive to the welfare needs precisely because they cannot be translated into prices, and also those in need lack the resources to pay the price set by the market. As Titmus said, capitalism is a biological failure. It is promoting the extinction of society. Though he did not reject the market, he maintained that it is the cause of those economic misfortunes that render some people in need of welfare. Since market relations are competitive, they must also be divisive. Society's welfare is not reducible to the individual's experiences of well being, to which he is entitled to by his own efforts, but consists of a complex amalgam of rational and communal sentiments. It can be said that the individuals, by living in society, in fact receive the economic rent, that is, the difference between the income they would receive outside society and that which they actually get because of their existence of social cooperation, which they do not directly create. Thus, welfare is a form of compensation drawn from collective resources, and this task can be performed by the state. The state can ameliorate the conditions under which the people live and work by providing for their health and safety and for their social and economic security. The state can reshape the economy in such a manner that a minimum level of social living is created for all citizens, irrespective of their status and class position in society. Now, the next point is individualistic. A sophisticated moral justification for the welfare state was based on individualistic grounds. It believes that the market forces do cause distress and hence undermine the notion of individual autonomy. This is inconsistent with the liberal beliefs in the equal autonomy of each individual and hence to restrain from aiding a person in deprivation where such action is not excessively costly is morally harming that person. In other words, welfare is not an act of morality but a compelling duty. This is embedded in the autonomy of the individual. A person who is formally free in the sense of not being coerced is not virtually free if their choices do not emanate from their autonomous will. According to Albert Valley, certain material conditions must necessarily hold for individuals to carry out a wide range of projects. It is not that people make wrong choices, but that in the absence of welfare, some people's choices are arbitrarily narrowed. If liberalism requires the conditions of equal autonomy for individuals and markets fail to provide, then government action is required to sustain the liberal social order. Similarly, Raymond Plant argues that the basic needs have to be satisfied to do anything at all. What makes needs objective is that they are a necessary means to the achievement of moral autonomy. Again, whereas wants cannot be the basis of a strict claim on others, needs can. This is because what makes need satisfaction of overriding importance is that the failure to provide for it is morally equivalent to harming someone. Now, the next point is enhances individual liberty. An important justification for the welfare state was that it enhances individual liberty. In fact, the welfare state was the natural corollary of the reinterpretation of liberty from being something negative to something not positive. Its intellectual roots are found in T.H. Green and continued through Basquiat, Ritchie, Hobhouse, Lasky, etc. In his famous essay Liberal Legislation and Freedom of Contract, Green defined liberty as freedom as something to be so highly prized. We mean a positive power or capacity of doing something worth doing or enjoying, and that too something that we do or enjoy in common with others. The function of the liberal state should be to support the existence of free society. He reached the conclusion that the function of the state can be nothing else but of maintaining the condition of life in which morality is possible. The state is to help man in realizing the ideal of self realization as a member of society by removing external hindrances. Its main function is to create the external conditions in which there will be the fewest possible impediments in the way of every man doing his best to himself. Stated in these terms, the state was made a welfare state. This is nothing less than liberating the human capacity for self determination. If illiteracy, ignorance, poverty, drinking, insanation are removed, the liberty of the individual is enhanced. On these grounds, Green advocated state intervention to enforce compulsory education, prohibition, state control over health and housing as necessary for the full development of the individual personality in and through the society. By insisting that it is the function of the state to remove all obstacle to good life and to provide conditions in which freedom could be pursued. Green laid the foundations of the 20th century welfare state. The First World War, socialist revolution in Russia, rise of fascism, and the world economic depression in the first half of the 20th century created a favorable environment for the welfare state, which was reflected in the writings of the Lasky, Keynes, Roosevelt, Gilbert, etc. For example, Lasky talked of liberty as the power of adding something to common life, a contribution which can be made if there are certain specific conditions that enable the individual to make the contribution and that institutions are not in his way. The former can be guaranteed by the state through the provision of rights and the latter through regulative legislation. In other words, the state was considered a source and condition of liberty. As he wrote, the state, in brief, is at best an adjuster, a coordinator, and the authority it exercises is morally valid only if it seeks to promote liberty. In particular, it meant reinterpreting the term economic liberty, which was considered as security and the opportunity to find reasonable significance in the earning of one's daily bread. It meant freedom from the constant fear of unemployment and insufficiency, which sap the whole strength of an individual's personality. Now we want to wind up today's lecture. Thank you so much for your attention.